Chapter 188 A Test of Love for Cyrenius. While Cyrenius was looking at his earth globe again with great attentiveness, the little child wanted to be put down so he might frisk back and forth a bit on the hill. At this Cyrenius set him on the ground ever so gently, and avowed, "O my life, my salvation, my all! Only from my hands do I free you bodily, but never, never from my heart. For there you dwell from now on quite alone, yes, you all alone are my love. Truly, as long as I have only you, my Saviour, then the whole world with all its treasures means less than nothing to me." Here the little child turned to Cyrenius again and said, "I will just have to remain with you after all, although I really would like to frisk around a bit, because you love me so much. If you had constantly gazed at your little earth, see, I would have become a bit bored with you. But since you have directed your heart as well as your whole attention to me again, I just have to remain with you and cannot separate myself from you. Now listen, my dear Cyrenius. Just what will your wife say to that, since she has surely heard that you love only me and no one else?" And Cyrenius asserted, "Lord, if I just have you, what do I care about my wife and the whole world? See, all that I am ready to trade off for a mite." Oh my Jesus, what can possibly give greater happiness than to love you above all things, and to be loved in return by you? Therefore I would rather despise Tullia, like a horde of locusts, than to depart from my love to you by only a hair's breadth. The little child now asked, "Cyrenius, if I tested you a bit in the matter, do you really think that you would remain constant?" And Cyrenius declared, "The way I now feel, you could turn the whole world to dust beneath my feet and take Tullia from me 1,000 times if it were possible, and I still would remain constant in my love toward you." Hereupon Tullia, as if smitten by a stroke, suddenly sank to the ground and was dead. This was a great shock to the whole company, and fresh lemon juice and water were quickly brought to revive her, but all effort was in vain, for Tullia was stone dead. And when Cyrenius saw that Tullia was really dead, he covered up his face and was very sad. Thereat, the little child asked the sorrowing Cyrenius, "Cyrenius, what am I to make of you now? See, the earth is still whole, and your wife is far from being killed 1,000 times, as you requested, and you sorrow as if you had lost everything in the world. Do you not still have me, just as before, when I meant everything to you? How then can you be so very sad?" Hereupon Cyrenius sighed deeply and said very plaintively, "O Lord, I just did not know how dear Tullia was to me as long as I had her, and only her loss showed me her worth. Therefore I am sad and will indeed sorrow for her, who was such a noble and faithful helpmate to me for the rest of my life." At this, the little child also sighed deeply and said, "Oh, you changeable children of men, how little constancy dwells in your hearts! If men are already like this in my presence, what will they be like when I am not among them any more?" "Cyrenius, what was I to you a few minutes ago, and what am I to you now? You cover your face before me as before the world, and your heart is so filled with sorrow that you can hardly hear my voice. Now I tell you, truly, like that, you are far from being worthy of me. For whoever still loves his wife more than me, he is not worthy of me, since I am, after all, more than woman, created by my power. I say to you, take better counsel with yourself in the future, or you will never see my face in this world." Thereupon, the little child went over to Joseph and told him, "Joseph, have the deceased one brought into the little side room, and have her lain on a bier." Here Joseph inquired, "My little son, will she never come back to life?" And the little child said, "Do not ask me about that, for my time is still a long way off, but do instead as I told you." See, the woman was jealous of me when Cyrenius confessed his love to me. It was this jealousy and this love envy which killed her so quickly. So do not ask me further, and have her brought into the little side room and lain on a bier, for she is really dead." At this Joseph promptly had the corpse brought into the house, and lain on a bier set up in a small side room. All now went over to Cyrenius and comforted him at this sudden loss of his wife. But Cyrenius soon uncovered his face, straightened up like a real hero, and said, "Oh, dear friends, do not comfort me in vain, for I have already found my consolation in my own heart, and you could not possibly give me a better one. See, the Lord gave me this noble wife in a truly wonderful way, and now he has taken her from me again. For he alone is truly the Lord of all life. Let everything therefore be offered up to him, and his holy name be praised and honoured for it always. It is indeed a hard blow to my weak human heart, but now I also perceive it to be all the more enlivening for my spirit. For by means of this the Lord has freed me, and I am not encumbered by any earthly bonds, and belong to him alone, and he alone is now the holy dweller in my heart. So do not comfort me, for he alone is my consolation forever." And the little child went to Cyrenius and said to him, "Amen, so be it forever. Like a breath, these years on earth in which we will still work here will pass away, and then you will be where I shall be forever, among those who will love me like you do. So be it forever and ever and ever." Chapter 189. Cyrenius builds a new living temple. The sons of Joseph now came and announced that the meal was prepared. Hereupon Joseph went over and told this to Cyrenius, who was giving his whole attention to the little child again, and asked him whether he was able to take any food because of his sorrow. And Cyrenius said, "O my noble brother, do you really think that I am in the least hungry? Just look here. How can one possibly become hungry in the company of him, through whom myriads and myriads are filled at every moment? Now, as concerns the sadness you suppose me to have, I dare say out of the fullness of my love to him who created you and me. See, where you sow one kernel of wheat into the ground, wherein it decays, he has 100 come up in place of the one. Now that is also the case here. Where the Lord takes one, he soon gives 1,000 for it. He has indeed taken the jealous Tullia from me, but he has given himself to me in her place. Oh, brother, what an infinite replacement that is for such a small loss! Instead of my wife, I can now call him eternally my own in my heart." Here Joseph stated, "Brother, you have become great before the Lord. Truly, you were a pagan, and now are better than many Israelites. Yes, I must confess it before you. Your heart and your mouth put me greatly to shame. For I have still to experience such submission to the Lord's will in myself." At this, the little child sat up and said, "Joseph, I know why I chose you, but you were never greater before me than even now, when you confess your weakness before a pagan. Now I tell you, since you already gave Cyrenius the witness that he is better than many Israelites, Cyrenius is more here than Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and more than Moses and the prophets, and more than David and Solomon. For their deeds were just because of their faith and great piety in their hearts. But Cyrenius is a first fruit, whom my love has awakened, and that is more than the entire old covenant which was dead, while Cyrenius is wholly alive. You know the magnificence of the temple in Jerusalem, which is a product of Solomon's wisdom. But that temple is dead like its designer, who sacrificed me for the women. And Cyrenius has now built me a new, living temple in his heart by his great self-denial. There I shall live eternally, and that is more than all the wisdom of Solomon." At this, Cyrenius began to weep for happiness, and Joseph, as well as Mary, deeply engraved these words in their hearts, for they were full of power and full of life. Chapter 190. The Lord over death and above the Sabbath. The little child then said to Cyrenius, "Cyrenius, you are indeed filled in your heart, and this stilling of your hunger will last you eternally. But your body is hungry, and you need sustenance there for the same purpose that I also need earthly sustenance for my body. So come down with me into the house, where we will eat a good fish, which Jonathan brought with him today, and which my brothers have prepared very well. For I must tell you that I much prefer to eat fish to that monotonous Jewish children's mush, and I am really looking forward to a good little portion. Oh, I tell you, my very dear Cyrenius, after the meal, you must play with me a bit, and your children also. You are still young, so you can run and jump around with me a little. This purely childish talk of the little child pleased Cyrenius so greatly that he quite forgot the dead Tullia, although his companions mourned her. And a few of the company also began to be concerned about Cyrenius, because of his gaiety, which seemed to be a form of madness to them. Moronius himself went over to Cyrenius and asked him how he felt. Here the little child promptly answered in place of Cyrenius, saying, "O Moronius, do not be concerned for my friend here, for he was never freer from madness in his whole life than now. I wish you were as sound as Cyrenius, for then you surely would not put such a question in my presence. Do you also come down with us to the table. Perhaps a good piece of fish will heal you." Cyrenius now went into the house with the little child, with Joseph, Mary, Jonathan, Eudokia, and with the 8 children, and Moronius followed them, although somewhat as if treading on thorns. But the rest of the great company mourned and did not go to the noon meal. After the meal, which all those present found very tasty, the little child promptly wanted to go out into the open again and play with the 8 children. But Mary said, "Now listen, my Jesus. You really may not play now, and neither may the 8 children, for in the first place it is now the Sabbath, and in the second place we have a corpse in the house, and there one must not play, but should be especially quiet and subdued." And the little child retorted, "Woman, what sort of spirit tells you to speak to me like that? Is the Sabbath more than I, and the dead woman more than my will? But so you may see that I stand above the Sabbath, and above the dead woman, and that she does not hinder me in my joy. Let her awaken." At these words, the corpse arose from the bier, and soon thereafter came into the room. The little child now told them to give her something to eat, and then promptly went out into the open with Cyrenius, while all were greatly surprised at this awakening. Chapter 191. Cyrenius wins a race with the child. When the little child was out in the open with Cyrenius and the other 8 children, he said to Cyrenius, "See that tree over there, and how far do you suppose it is from here?" "I would say," replied Cyrenius, "that it should, by good measure, be about 200 paces from here." And the little child said, "Then let us race there and see which of us has the fastest feet." Here Cyrenius smiled and observed, "O Lord, with your earthly strength you will no doubt be the last one to reach the tree." But the little child said, "Only the result will show that, so let us make the attempt." At this, the racers ran with all their might, and the little child was at the tree first. Upon arriving at the tree, Cyrenius, almost out of breath, asserted, "O Lord, I just knew that you would not run naturally, and thus would reach the goal first. For you are carried by unseen powers, but I am carried only by my sluggish feet." Here the little child stated, "Cyrenius, herein you have once more gone astray. For your feet are animated by unseen powers as well as mine. But the difference consists in that I am a master, but you are only a student of the powers. And when you really learn to exercise your powers, you will also be able to use them like the master does. Now, let us run back, and we will see who will reach the place in front of the house first this time." Here, Cyrenius quickly bent down to the earth, lifted up the little child, and ran back with him, and was by far the first one to the goal. Arrived there, the little child smiled and said, "That was great fun. See, you have achieved mastery at once. You saw the master, took him up, and therewith became a master yourself. Now mark the lesson therein. In the future, no one will become a master by his own efforts any more. But if he takes up the master, he then will become a master through the master whom he has taken up. It matters little who is able to run the fastest, but for all that, everyone should strive to reach the goal set by me ahead of any other goal, and ahead of anyone else. Whoever will undertake the path of life on his own power, he will be the last. But whoever will do as you just did during the second race, he will also find himself to be the first at the goal, just like you. Now let us change over to another pastime and have some fun in a childlike way.